All right, hello again, everybody. Welcome to our second part of the history of psychology, the history of psychology part B. So we'll get started here, and we have our objectives and standards here to recognize the importance of different historical periods of psychology, and to summarize the contributions of individuals to psychology throughout history. And please read the standards there. Our desired result. How did psychology change over time? So again, thinking about some of the different views and perspectives we're going to look at today in the lesson, and how did they change over time? What were some of the different opinions or views and things like that? So there are other approaches throughout history to psychology, and one of those is psychoanalytic. And what this basically is some psychologists were interested in the conscious mind while others studied the unconscious. So psychoanalytic psychologists and scientists will look at the unconscious mind. And the most famous of these is Sigmund Freud, who maybe you've heard of before. He was a psychologist in Vienna, Austria, and he played a role in psychoanalytic psychology. And he believed that conscious experiences were just the beginning. So he's more focused on the unconscious, so things we don't consciously think about all the time. So he believed that unconscious conflicts and motivations were responsible for most of human behavior. So, things we don't really think about, dreams, things in our dreams that we're not consciously preparing ourselves for or consciously aware of, that they were the things that cause most conflicts and motivations. And Freud also believed that they were the cause of medical problems of some of his patients. So he came up with a new indirect method of studying the unconscious, and this was known as free association. And there's a picture of Sigmund Freud there. In this new approach, patients said everything that came to their mind, relevant or irrelevant, with or without logical meaning. And they were also told not to edit or censor anything. So Freud may say, tell me about your day yesterday. And he didn't want people to think and say, well, I got up, I had breakfast, then I went to work, then I came home, I had dinner, and I went to bed, and it was an overall good day. Now, yes, that may have been true, but what Freud was looking for was what was really else going on in your mind. Well, I woke up late, and, my breakfast was cold, and I got to work, and my boss gave me a hard time, and blah, 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 and he's such a jerk, and blah, blah, blah. That's what he was looking for. He was looking for those things about how did those things unconsciously that you're not always thinking about impact your behavior? And he was also known for using dream analysis, like we mentioned, to analyze behavior. So, what was in your dreams? Did you dream about a bicycle? Did you dream about, you were eating ice cream? Whatever. And many of Freud's techniques are still used today by psychologists. Many psychologists will ask their patients, how you doing? And they just want the person to kind of go off and say whatever's in their mind, relevant, irrelevant, how much, no matter what, and just kind of tell them, what's going on in their life. There are other approaches to psychology as well, behavior psychology, and this was kind of initiated by a Russian psychologist, Ivan Pavlov, who came up with a new method for investigating psychology. What he did was he rang a tuning fork when he gave a dog meat powder. Now the dog's mouth would salivate or drool when the powder reached its mouth. Excuse me. After several rounds of this, Pavlov would then ring the tuning fork without no food. Now the dog would hear the tuning fork and automatically tie the tuning fork to being fed. So the dog would salivate or like I said, drool without any food when it heard the noise. I'm going to show you a picture of this to make a little bit more sense. So again, Pavlov would give the dog food. The dog would see the food. The dog drools, salivates, things like that. The Pavlov would ring a bell, and of course the dog maybe wouldn't really respond. The dog wouldn't respond to the bell. Obviously, it's not going to salivate at the sound of a bell. But then what Pavlov did was then he would ring a bell and show the food, and the dog would salivate. And after he did this a couple more times, pardon me, Pavlov would then just ring the bell without the food, and the dog would think that when he heard the bell that meant food was coming. Okay? So there's hopefully an image that kind of explains that a little bit more. So the conditioned reflex was the response of the salivation. So the dog would, obviously salivate when it saw the food, and this was triggered by a stimulus, which would have been the tuning fork. Okay, so again, stimulus, conditioned response. This concept would be used by psychologists to explore the development of behavior. So why do we behave the way we do, just like the dog when it heard the tuning fork and there was no food? Behavior can be accounted for as the product of a prior experience. So again, if you had a negative experience with clowns in your life, or a negative experience with the dentist, maybe a clown scared you when you were 3, 4 years old, and now today, when you're a teenager, you see a clown come up to you, you freak out and you start getting very anxious, you start getting very nervous. Well, that's because a prior experience may have done that to you. It could also explain how certain acts and differences among individuals were the result of learning, so why we act and learn different ways. So behaviorists are psychologists who stressed observing behavior, just like Pavlov did, observing behavior about why we act and do the things we do. John B. Watson formulated the view that psychology should be only focused on observable behavior, so only things that they can see, only things that we can see people do. Watson also argued that behavior, even instinctive behavior, is a result of conditioning and occurs because of the appropriate stimulus present in the environment. Again, something like if you were terrified by a clown when you were 3 years old, you're going to freak out now when you're 30 years old because you see a clown. That's why many of our fears are based on that. Now, another behaviorist, B.F. Skinner, introduced the concept of reinforcement. Now, reinforcement is a response to behavior that increases the likelihood that the behavior will be repeated. Again, the clown thing, just like the clown fears or fears of thunderstorms, whatever. In 1949, Skinner's Walden 2 portrayed a small-town utopia where conditioning rules every conceivable part of life. So again, people were controlled by their behaviors. Okay, humanism. So humanistic psychology developed as a response to behaviorism. Abraham Maslow, Carl Rogers, and Rollo, and other humanists in the 1960s, described human nature as evolving and self-directed. What does that mean? Humanists believe that the environment or the unconscious mind, like Freud had talked about, do not control humans. They believe that the environment and other outside forces are background for growth. They also stated that the humanistic approach emphasizes that each person is unique and each person has potential and self-concept to develop fully. So you make you, people can build and grow themselves on their own free will. And this potential for personal growth and development can help create a more happy life. So, you being able to grow yourself how you want to leads to a happier life. Cognitive psychology benefited from the contributions of people such as Jean Piaget, I'm probably messing up that name, Noam Chomsky, and Leon Festinger since the 1950s. People who are cognitivists focus on how we process, store, and use information. So our memories, how we build memories, retrieve memories, all those things. And they believe that behavior is more than just a simple response to a stimulus. So again, going back to Pavlov and the dog, behavior is not just, oh, I had a scary experience with a clown or a thunderstorm or a dentist. Behavior is influenced by memories, expectations, and other mental processes. Biological psychology, this is the idea that focuses on the biology of behavior. These psychobiologists study the brain, the nervous system, genetics, hormones, and how all those different things in our biology inside our body influence behavior. They use tools such as PET scans and CAT scans, maybe you've heard of them or had them before, to achieve this. And just like we talked about in the last lesson, genetic factors can play a role and influence behavior. So how your parents or your grandparents or even your ancestors acted or whatever they may have done influences how you behave sometimes. All those genetic factors can influence why and how you do the things you do. Sociocultural psychology. This approach is the newest to psychology. It studies how cultural and ethnic similarities and differences impact behavior and social functioning. So these types of psychologists will investigate how knowledge and ways of thinking, feeling, and behaving depend on the culture we belong to. They look at how immigrants come to the United States and their social and cultural backgrounds, their attitudes, values, norms, roles, all their beliefs can impact behavior. And they also look at methods to reduce discrimination and intolerance. Sometimes they can also focus on gender studies and economic statuses to see how these impact human behavior and mental processes as well. Okay, so our closure. Again, how has psychology changed over time? Thinking about a lot of the different approaches we talked about, behaviorism, humanism, psychoanalytic approaches, some of the different social views of psychology, and how have those changed over time, how they similar, different. You don't have to explain every single one of them in your weekly summary today, or later this week, but try to just kind of, pick maybe one or two to explain about how psychology has kind of changed over time in different views and theories. All right, again, include these things in your weekly summary. Let me know of any questions or concerns, and I hope to talk to you soon. Bye-bye.